Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality. It may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everybody. This is Natasha Helfer from the Natasha Helfer Podcast, and I am thrilled to have with me today the author of Closeted. So, Jonathan Alder, but my life as a gay BYU student. So, I was just reading this last week, and really excited to have you on, Jonathan. So,
yeah.
This is a show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a show where we try to combat shame in any way we can. And I think we do a pretty good job at that. trying to say, hey, where are the hidden places where maybe I'm still carrying shame in my body or in my story or in what happened to me, or how is shame used to control me or to, influence. And I think most of us have been very much affected by, in particular, sexual shame, and especially those in the LGBTQIA plus, community. So I'm really thrilled to be having this conversation with you.
Yeah, and thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's get started. I mean, the book starts with you, the beginning of your BYU journey, Brigham Young University, which for those who don't know, that's a university that is owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church or the mainstream Mormon Church, and where a lot of people go who are Latter-day Saint or Latter-day Saint adjacent, or, for some reason or another, want that type of kind of religious influence to their education. I would say, unless they're maybe in the sports departments, maybe they don't go for those reasons, but
yeah,
I think that's why most people go there. So sure. Yeah, why don't we just let you start kind of at the beginning of, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your story and how you ended up at BYU, and maybe even also where you were in your own kind of coming out process, not necessarily to others, but also to yourself.
Yeah. So I think, when I started out at BYU, I was just getting home from my mission, but I had done a year of schooling at USU, and I transferred there, as a result of, both friends and just feeling like that would be a really good place for me to be, because, when I was, a return missionary and on my mission, I was pretty determined that I was going to live a straight lifestyle. I felt that I could get through life without giving into that, I guess, as I saw it at the time, without, ever having to confront any aspect of my sexuality, just kind of, get through life, marry, do the whole plan, and, just get through life without, sinning, essentially. And so, yeah, I went to BYU as a result of that. It was very attractive. The environment, just the sense of safety and confidence that I felt like the school provided in that environment. It didn't quite work out, which we'll get to later. But when I started out there, I was not at all out of the closet. I went there for an entire year before even really confronting the fact that, like, oh, this is a thing that's not going away, type thing. I was 2 years into college basically before I finally realized, like, I don't know how to make this go away. I don't know if it is going to go away, and what I'm doing is not working. And it's feeling unsustainable at this point, because up until then I thought I had it. I really, really did. And a big part of the motivation and everything I did in my childhood was really to not have to confront that and to get through life without that ever coming out. It would just always be a secret. That's kind of what I would consider really the setup for the book. I mean, there's more in the book, obviously, but I guess we're a little bit bound by time here. Starting the second year at BYU and my third year at college is really when I was starting to open up a little bit more to getting to know, myself. And I feel like I took what I would consider now to be a healthy enough approach to that, a nuanced enough approach to that, where I was like, this isn't working. I don't know what's going to work, but I need to actually like give dating a serious try. And that could mean men, but that could mean women. And I don't think that I've actually given an honest effort. So year 3 was kind of the beginning of what I would consider to me feeling like I was finally giving an honest effort where I would be a little more okay with experimenting and trying to get to know myself and trying to figure out, what I needed to do in terms of, establishing a life that would be sustainable. And I can just keep going through the book. And does that work? Or
but before we do that, I mean, again, just context. I mean, right off the bat, you're saying some things that are pretty heavy duty, right? Like, hey, my gayness was first of all considered a sin by my church and faith community, which that's not unique to Mormonism. I think there's a lot of people who come from certain religious backgrounds where that's considered a sin. It's considered a choice. It's considered, something you're not supposed to engage in, ignore even. Typically, these don't talk about being gay. They talk about being same-sex attracted, kind of like it's a temptation or, a challenge that you're supposed to overcome. And so, so maybe can we go back in your background?
For sure.
Like, at what point did you start either realizing, oh, maybe I am having a crush on a boy, and what were the messages you were receiving either at home or at church that led you to feel like, I better not say this. I better not talk about this. I better not think about this.
Yeah. So I would say that the moment that I learned and understood what being gay was, I understood enough to attribute that to myself. The first time I had it spelled out to me by a friend, like the disconnect between like, being straight and being gay, I knew that was applicable to me. And just from a purely youthful kind of standpoint of just not even really understanding these things, I knew I wasn't straight. And, I definitely glossed over a little bit of my childhood there, but like, and maybe I talk about it a little bit, flippantly now, but it definitely takes you to some dark places as a child when you have this thing that is not how the world is supposed to work. So far as like the information that you're given this information, told the world works this certain way. And internally you're thinking like, it doesn't work that way. Something's wrong. This is really wrong. And so, I think I and a lot of queer people in general, and I don't want to speak for all queer people. I'm not trying to do that here, but for sure, I and a lot of queer people experience that disconnect, and that leads to some pretty self-destructive thoughts of not fitting in, not fitting with the mold that you're given, and that led me down suicidal ideation very, very early on in my childhood, where I can remember several distinctive memories where I would just feel like I didn't want to be here anymore. I don't know. I don't want to do this. I don't want to confront this. And I didn't even have the vocabulary to really vocalize that. And I probably didn't gain the vocabulary to vocalize that for quite some time. the example that I give in the book, not that it's the only example, but the example that I give in the book is our scoutmaster growing up had taught us how to make nooses. I don't know why he taught us how to make a noose. It wasn't a good idea. I don't know. I don't know why he would do that. He taught us how to make a noose. And I remember tying so many nooses as a child, just like kind of like thinking about that and contemplating it. And, obviously I never followed through on any of that, but I dwelled there for so long. And I guess now that I'm thinking about it, it was for sure a coping mechanism of some sort where, life was hard and the future was scary and not something I wanted to deal with. And so even just like fantasizing about that not being something that I have to confront was like enticing, I guess, to me as a child. Just like, the future sucks. So think about death, I guess. And so I spent a lot of time there as a kid, more time than I probably would like to dwell on. But yeah, I spent a lot of time there as a child. And
Symmetry is now offering ketamine services. To find out more, go to simcounseling.com/ketamine-services.
What ages are you talking about as far as kind of coming into your own awareness of what it might mean to be gay? And then, of course, at what age do you feel like the suicidal ideation started taking place?
It's been a bit. If I had to guess off the top of my head, I would probably say from like 8th and 9th grade when it really started to set in, probably through 11th grade, is when I would say I was pretty consistently suicidal. I would say it got better in my senior year and in my first year of college, just because, ironically, I had the mission coming up, and I don't know, like the mission was something that I for sure dreaded as a child. Like it was just this thing that was always in front of me, and I dreaded it so much. But the closer it got, the more that took over, I guess, as the primary focus in my life, because it's a big deal to spend 2 years as a 19-year-old doing that. And so, I think that definitely distracted me. And I think that, the church in general was a good distraction because it kind of perfectly aligned with my sense of not wanting to come out. So I didn't want to come out, and being able to kind of dive headfirst into the church was a good way to not do that. Mm-hmm. And so I definitely compensated to some degree by becoming more religious. And it's always going to be a question to me, like, how religious would I have been if I was like a straight person? Like I will always wonder that for the rest of my life. How much would the church have been important to me if I wasn't gay? Because I certainly know that because I was gay, I for sure dove headfirst into it as a means of escaping something that was hard. And so, yeah.
In some ways was the source of your problem, because it's telling you like, hey, this is not an okay way to be. And then the solution to your problems, because you could dive into it and kind of distract yourself from all the things that you were thinking about and worried about. And at least a mission was a reprieve, like, oh, okay, well, at least I know what I'm supposed to do for the next 2 years, even if I'm dreading.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. Yes.
For sure. That's it, I think, in a nutshell. And another reason why I think that after the mission, I chose to go to BYU, because it just, as hard as the mission was, and it was very hard, I appreciated that it didn't force me to confront myself. I could just slip into the system, do the work, and avoid getting to know myself, avoid confronting what I knew I was, as a gay person and just, do the plan, do the plan until death, and then nobody has to know. And so the mission was a way of running.
Yeah, the plan to be gay, get a career, marry a woman, have children, serve the church, and die. That's the plan? Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And had you told anybody up until your mission or those first few years at BYU? Like, is this something that you just held internally? Were you able to ever talk to family, or did you try to talk to ecclesiastical leaders or friends about what you were going through?
So I remember, I told one childhood friend that I was gay, and it was only because he was also gay, and I thought that I had some insight. I did not have insight, but I thought I had insight. And so
to help him, you mean, on how to be?
Yes.
Be gay.
Yeah. And so that's the only person that I told. We're still very good friends to this day. And so I told him probably the closest. I've never told anyone this. The closest other person that I didn't tell but came close to possibly telling was one of my childhood bishops I was in an interview with, and he was like, "Do you have any problems masturbating?" And I was like, "No." And I remember feeling so guilty for lying that I wrote a letter to him addressed to the bishop, and I walked to his house like a mile, like after midnight. Oh, this is like half embarrassing almost. But I walked to his house in the pitch dark to deliver a letter to him telling him that I masturbated. And so no, I never told him I was gay, but he definitely knew some things. And so, it was very structured, very religiously oriented, very much a thing of can't look outside the guardrails of my life because no one can ever know this about me. So I don't know. There was obviously religious shame, but there was also just general societal homophobia that I was unwilling to deal with.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Which maybe is more prevalent in Utah, but yeah, it was a combination of those two things. It's just the religiosity and the internalized homophobia that, as a gay person can be quite difficult to work through, but that's I guess part of the work of moving forward.
Well, and as you talk about how seriously you took that, that idea that you had maybe not been forthcoming with your bishop about masturbation, and when you talk about these younger years and your high school years of being suicidal because you knew that you were gay, it just speaks to the level of deep kind of, what do I want to say? Like, I don't think it's orthodoxy as much as like deep commitment that many members have to their church, right? To their community.
For sure.
The ideals, to the standards, to the point that if you can't fit into that box, it's a better option to, consider yourself just leaving this existence, right? Or it seems like an okay option to walk, a mile away in the middle of the night because it's so pressing that I have to take care of this thing that I did incorrectly. So it kind of leads to scrupulosity, kind of these scrupulous thoughts. And I think we were having a discussion with some therapists today about this, is like, are people OCD or do we breed OCD? Right.
Yeah.
It's really a scrupulous system that tells you to be compelled by the things that you believe and then to obsess about them. And then the compulsions are about the behaviors trying to assert these of testimonies and things. So that's really hard. Okay. So you're trying to follow the plan. You're trying to be the good Mormon boy. You're trying to pray the gay away. You're doing all the right things, confessing and going to the bishops and going on your mission and then choosing BYU school that you would go to, all with this idea of like, okay, if I just, dive in, if I, really commit to this, it'll somehow work out. It'll be okay. I just have to follow the plan. Right. So when does this start not working as well for you? What are the first kind of things that you start noticing it's not going well?
Yeah. So I would say that, the bulk of my book is about a single year. And I would say that the summer before that year is really when I kind of started to run out of steam and think, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if I can make this work. It was a combination of a lot of things, but I think ultimately it was just this realization that I'm beginning life and I hate my options, and a lot of my straight friends seem to be having such a different experience than I feel like I am having. I would say that was really the kind of the genesis of it. And, then beginning that year, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but beginning that year, I started a relationship with this girl. And, initially that had given me a lot of like hope, like, oh, I was discouraged over the summer, but maybe things are actually going to work out. Maybe things with this new relationship, maybe everything's going to work out. And, that was just a crisis that, we managed, and that's all in the past. And, obviously as you know, that did not work out. Yeah, it was definitely in that moment, in that probably 2-month time frame of the summer before that year, where I was just like, something's got to give. I can't keep going like this. I was out of steam.
Yeah. And so I think one of the first few things that you do is you start actually coming out to a few people in your life. Is that fair about that time? Like,
yeah.
The first people you talked to was your mom, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I had started dating this girl, Claire, and I did tell her initially because I was just like very sure that like, which is awkward, which is ironic because I definitely wanted it to remain a secret, but maybe it was like it only needed to be a secret insofar as I thought I was afraid of it, I guess. But I was less afraid of it for some reason at that point in time. And so I told Claire, I told my mom. Those are really the first two people that I came out to. And with Claire, I just wanted to be very clear with her, like, this is the situation. And with my mom, I don't know why I did it how I did it, and I don't know why I did it when I did it. But with her, I was just kind of like, I have no idea what I'm going to end up doing. I don't know if I'm going to be with a man. I don't know if I'm going to be with a woman. I don't know. And I just need you to know that this is a thing. It's not a phase. And I just need you to know this and accept that. I don't know what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, that was also very important to me at that time, to just be very, very clear with her, even though being clear is not something that I had necessarily done up until that point.
Right. And yeah, almost like a testing, right? Or I almost felt it like a release valve almost in the book, like somebody in your proximity needed to know, and then almost like a testing, am I still accepted? Am I still loved? And so how do you feel your mom did as an LDS mom, with that process, which I have a lot of compassion for. And also I'm a parent of a queer kid as well. And I know I definitely messed up too. So what are your thoughts?
I mean, so no one is perfect, and no one's going to have the perfect reaction in every situation. But what I would say about how my mom handled it, that I have a lot of admiration for, is that the net impression of those first interactions was very positive, in the sense that I knew that our relationship was headed somewhere positive. I knew she cared about me. I knew, like, we talked about it for hours and hours and hours initially. And, it was a situation of, for sure, she didn't know what she was doing, but also she just gave me space to talk, and not necessarily like judge the things that I was saying. And I remember, talking to her about, like, I guess later on, talking to her after I had started, dating men, showing her the guys I had been on dates with, and like she'd ask questions like, "Have you kissed any of them?" And it was almost like she didn't know how to ask that, or how she should ask that, or like, it was very new territory, so it was full of fumbling on both sides of just like not really knowing how to navigate the situation or what was appropriate. Like, all right, can you say something that's inherently like almost scandalous, like, "Have you kissed a boy?"
Right.
And it's like, it was a very new dynamic that I think became very relieving. To me personally, because I mean, I like what you said earlier about it almost being like this release valve of pressure, because obviously, like, your mom's the person the longest in your, well, when you're in a situation like mine, your mom's the person that the longest in your life. And so to throw that big of a paradigm shift into the equation is for sure scary, but also, almost a relief when it's done and you're figuring things out.
The thing that stood out to me the most about what you wrote of that coming out to your mom process was that she did express some concern or some sadness, but she also expressed deep love for you. And she, I think, made it very clear that she wanted you alive more than anything else, and I think that was very wise, right, of her to focus on that particular.
And she
I want you here.
And she opened up with her own experiences, which is not something that we had ever had the experience of doing. And so it became, I think, a really meaningful way for us to connect.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so yes, probably the next place I want to go and explore is this relationship with Claire, right? So I think that there was some hesitation that I picked up on in the book as far as whether or not you wanted to try a heterosexual relationship. It felt almost like, well, if one would land in my lap, maybe that would be the answer, right?
Yes.
Right. As far as keeping on that path that you mentioned earlier, of like, I can just make it till I die, then I'll be great. That's kind of the idea. And so here comes this, young woman, right, who is at BYU with you, and she's quite aggressive in her approach. She's, kind of pursuing you and pursuing dating. And, and there were so many complications in this relationship that I picked up on as you were talking about it, that I was like, oh, wow, it's just, so yeah, I'd like for you to kind of talk about kind of where your head was at and how you were kind of logically thinking through this relationship and why, you went along with it. But I also think you had quite a few traumatic kind of responses to this relationship as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was for sure a lot of trauma associated with the relationship. It was very much, as you said, something that landed into my lap, and I was just kind of like, yeah, okay, sure, we'll see where this goes, because maybe everything will work out. And I was young. I was had no idea what I was doing. And the first red flag that should have been a red flag really was her saying, "I love you," after knowing me for like 3 weeks, and using that to kind of pressure me into this relationship that I had serious misgivings about. Even though she was interested in me, and I was willing to go along with it. And I would say that in terms of why I stayed, maybe one thing that I didn't do great about in the portrayal in the book was showing that we were just young college kids having fun for the most part, until it started to get more overtly abusive. And once the abuse started, it became less and less and less fun, until we were both very, very miserable together. And so, in terms of trying to portray that relationship, it was really trying to figure out, trying to balance, the abuse side with trying to show the audience why I stayed. And I probably didn't. It would have required the book to be longer, basically, to show those early, more positive sides of the relationship. And there were positive sides, and there was joking, and there was levity. But then, I don't know. I think exactly the relationship lasted 2 months, and exactly a month in is basically when no, I won't say that. Earlier than that, there were signs of emotional manipulation and abuse. But exactly a month in is when the sexual, I don't know what to say, coercion or manipulation, sexual assault started kind of happening, where, I think because I was gay and she kind of fetishized being with a gay person, she, and then also with the idea that she could be the person that stops me from being gay. She used all of that. That makes it sound calculated, and I don't mean it to, but she justified all of that to kind of push situations that were sexual in a very consensual way, because the first time it happened, I'm a little bit rambly here, so I apologize, but the first time it happened, I didn't know what to do or how to respond. It was just like very sudden, and I just kind of like froze, and didn't know what to do. But obviously the relationship continued, and we'd talk about it, and we'd talk about what had happened, and try to set boundaries. It's not okay for you to do what you're doing. It's not okay for you to climb on top of me and just, do whatever you want. None of that is okay. I've never given you that permission. And even in if we're making out or whatever, I never said that was okay. And it didn't really matter how many times we had that conversation. She didn't really respect that boundary. And probably, the worst instance that, I delve into in the book was, for some reason, we went to her house for the weekend. I don't really remember why we did that, to be honest. But we went to her house for the weekend, and she used that opportunity as a way to have me in a room that was not like a BYU dorm room where, she felt like, she could. I don't know. I don't know what her goal was, to be honest, because I don't think she wanted to have sex either. But I will never understand the actions or the intent behind what she was doing, because her words contradicted what she was doing, and her intentions contradicted what she was doing, and her stated goals of wanting to be married in the temple and go through things, it all contradicted. And so, when we were in that situation where I was in her childhood room and she was, sexually assaulting me, I don't know what she was trying to accomplish, because I don't know. I'll never know, because obviously I'm not going to ever talk to her again. But yeah, that happened for about a month. And I was running out of steam. I don't know. I did break up with her at the beginning of that November, but not before she had us go see the bishop together. And so that setup, I think, really started me down this path of just this slow motion car crash, basically, because I never put myself back together throughout the course of that year. And maybe if I wasn't on my bishop's radar, I could have been able to do that. But I was on my bishop's radar, and it was because my girlfriend was sexually assaulting me, and I didn't know how to communicate that. And so, yeah.
Yeah, this whole story, first of all, it's fascinating to hear you say it's 2 months, because, if I hadn't remembered that, it felt like a year-long relationship.
It really did feel like that, though.
Things that were happening between the two of you. And some of the dynamics that I saw in your relationship with her really mimic dynamics of the BYU dating scene. Like you say, oh, it's a red flag for somebody to tell you that they love you in 3 weeks. I think that's actually very common at BYU, where it feels like that initial relationship energy that people experience means something bigger than that, like it's meant to be. And because we are so culturally aware of, the premarital sex is a big no-no. And of course, immediately people are feeling a lot of people who are dating are feeling arousal and excitement. And that all gets tied up into these emotions that feel like, well, you must be my current, chance at an eternal companion. And so the fact that you told her that you were gay right from the get-go, pretty much, and the fact that she ignored that and really saw that probably as an obstacle to overcome, which I think that does happen to a lot of, I think, women in particular in the church, that will see that as like, well, now I can play that caretaker role. I can play that savior role of helping you get to the celestial kingdom by, marrying you and helping you out of this predicament that you're in. Gay. So, and I'm not sure that's conscious. I don't think people wake up in the morning going, that's how they think about it. I think subconsciously, a lot of that is happening. One thing that I think, my guess, if I had to guess, my thoughts about her aggression towards you sexually had to do with 3 components. One is that she was just turned on by you. She probably just was, you weren't having that experience, but I think she was having that experience. I think the second thing is that she was trying to prove to you that you weren't gay, right? Like if we kiss and if we make out and if you're willing to do that with me, then how can you be gay? And And I think the third thing is kind of a lot of these gender roles, which is even though as women, we're kind of taught to be the submissive ones, especially when you're talking about how she really became quite coercive and sexually assaulted you, we don't talk about that with women. Only men do those things, right? So men want sex, of course, right? Don't all men want sex, and don't all men want vaginas, right? And so there, I can't coerce you and I can't sexually assault you because, of course, if I'm going to offer it, you're going to want it and you're going to take advantage of it, right? And so I see those three potential reasons as to why she was showing up the way she did. I think one of the things that was so harmful to you, and if you don't mind talking about, because it's pretty personal, but it's in your book, so I'm guessing it's okay for me to ask about it. But, you know, your body became aroused. And I think a lot of people don't know how to distinguish between arousal and desire, right? And so when somebody's being kissed or stroked or touched, your body may respond in an arousal way. You may have gotten an erection, right? You may have had some things. And so she would see that as a sign, that arousal is a sign of desire when it wasn't a sign of desire.
Yeah.
So, and that ended up being pretty traumatic for you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think that, and I wouldn't consider myself an expert in this field. So hopefully, you know, if I say anything incorrect, feel free to correct me. But I would say that, like, with men, it can be a very, you know, mechanical sort of process. And so she would just kind of see the arousal and say, oh, he must be enjoying this. And it's like, there doesn't have to be enjoyment associated with that. Which I think can be maybe a hard concept for people who haven't experienced that. But yeah, there doesn't have to be any enjoyment associated with that. And if it's perceived as that and perceived as permission, then yeah, it's pretty damaging.
Yeah. Well, and I think in female bodies, it's lubrication. It's like, well, you were wet, so that must mean that you wanted it, right? And
yeah.
So, whether it's erections or lubrications or nipples getting taut or whatever, plus you have the freeze response that I think was happening for you. I think a part of you to let it happen because you were like, well, this is the path to the way. But then you that was resisting that was, at least what I see, is the freeze response, that you were freezing up and it was difficult for you to even know what to do in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of internal conflict because it's like, I mean, there's it's never like the victim's fault, but when you're in that position, you're always going to think like, should I have done something different? You know, was I responsible on some level for not having done something different? Was it sort of this like curiosity of like, this is happening, and so if I just don't do anything, will I get confirmation of, is this the life I can live? Like, it's so convoluted where it's like, I mean, first of all, you didn't ask for it. It wasn't consensual. It was always unconsensual. But at the same time, it's like, this happened and I have very complicated feelings about it that are very, very difficult to parse. And I don't, it's hard to step through why I responded in the way that I did, you know? So yeah, it's tricky. I don't know. It's just tricky.
It's tricky. It's very, very complicated. And I think it's almost like when I talk to women about duty or obligatory sex, it's like, well, I felt like I had to be in that position, whether I communicated it or not to the partner. But I think what makes your story unique too is that you did have many conversations with this person, Claire, and asked for those boundaries, and they were just consistently ignored, or she'd push through, which again, I think comes, not that men don't do that, men definitely do that. Problems for that reason. But I think, again, we don't usually think of women being as sexual assaulters. And so I think that as a woman, you're like, oh, I'm just supposed to seduce him. I'm supposed to, convince him that this is good. And so I see you playing kind of and I think you were using correct me if I'm wrong, but you weren't saying to her, I don't want to do this because I'm gay and because I don't feel this level of attraction for you, or this doesn't feel resonant to me in my body. You were using the law of chastity as the reason. You were saying we shouldn't be doing this because if we want to get married and all of that, then, this is not the way we get there.
Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind that we would have ended up married if she hadn't been doing those things. If we had been, staying within the bounds of, the church and the honor code, we for sure would have been married.
Because you wouldn't have been as confronted with the sexual piece prior to.
Yes. Yeah. Which is just kind of a mind fuck, I guess, because it's like, I guess I ended up in a better place because of it. Sucks. It had to be that caused it, but yeah.
It gave you enough ability to boundary yourself, even though it wasn't from a great place. Yeah, super interesting. So let's juxtapose that with how you start. What's that experience like to be with, a woman versus what you start experimenting with as far as your first dating experiences with men and all. And I want to say too, all along the way, you're involved with North Star, which is an organization that basically helps Latter-day Saint gay men like either stay celibate or stay true to their religious kind of values or standards. We're also involved with USGA, which is a student organization at BYU that's supposed to supporting gay. Is it gay men or is it just queer people in general?
Just queer people in general. Sorry.
Right. So you want to talk a little bit about both of those organizations and what your experience was like, and also maybe.
For sure. So I would say that, so kind of going back just a little bit, at the beginning of the year, I was just trying to figure some things out. And, that involved being open to relationships, which is why I dated Claire. And then, I had heard about USGA and I figured, no harm in just checking it out. And there wasn't. That sounds ominous. That was kind of my mindset. There wouldn't be any harm in at least checking it out and just seeing. And so I did. And it's a group that has probably gone under some iterations because it used to be called Understanding Same Gender Attraction, which is a very church-centric framing of it. And I believe it is now called Understanding Sex and Gender.
Understanding Sexuality, Gender, and Allyship.
That. Thank you. So it's undergone a little bit of I think it's brilliant that they changed the acronym without changing the name. Like, I don't know who came up with that, but it's like, kudos to whoever did that because I think it's brilliant. Anyway, I started going to USGA every week. It's a very good group for BYU students, in my opinion. It's just kind of a fairly neutral place that's kind of generally it's very general is probably what I would say about it. It's got you know, a mental health aspect to it. It's got a spiritual aspect to it. Like, it's got all of these different committees that are focused on areas of need for the queer community in BYU or Provo, just in general. I think it's open to everyone. And with North Star, I would say that my involvement with North Star was fairly limited. Like, I had there's a lot of resources from the church focused on gay people in a kind of a faith affirming sort of way. And I had for sure been exposed to all of that enough to, you know, like enough to validate the path that I was on in terms of like marrying a woman. I joined North Star kind of on a whim. The official Facebook page, I had known about it before. And, you know, I made tons of contacts from it. You know, I actually ended up finding like one of my next door neighbors at the time was gay. We never dated or had any sort of romantic involvement, but it was really good to have a next door neighbor who's a friend and who was also gay. And you know, so it just kind of like revealed to me the prevalence. Like you talk to any straight person in Provo and you would think that like being, you know, queer is like such a minority. But when you step into that world, you realize, yeah, obviously it's a minority, but it's a much bigger minority than you would think from a heteronormative perspective. And so that was probably my first big lesson stepping into that community, is just how big it is, how involved it is, how much culture there is there that you're just taught as a church member is all wholesale evil. But it's like there's like so many variations of culture within the queer community that it's almost not even, you know, a single community. It's a big subset of communities, and you know, it's so much deeper and richer and more diverse than you're allowed to even know when you're really heavily involved with the church, at least from my perspective as a person who is afraid of being gay. So anyway, so I started getting involved with these groups right around the same time that I started dating Claire. And it became this weird sort of almost absurd juxtaposition of like just complete dread on one hand and really optimistic hope on the other hand. Because I met this boy who in the book, his name is Easton, and you know, it was really a combination of a lot of factors. I think I was on very high alert. I was like very nervous and went to my first USGA meeting and just completely fell head over heels in love with this boy while I was dating Claire. And that became near the end of my relationship with her. That became kind of this almost absurd source of hope, like knowing I'm going to end this relationship and go to something so much better that I was raised to believe was not okay, not great, not very sinful. But I'm going to get out of this relationship and my life is going to drastically improve overnight because I'm going to be in a place that I want to be in. And I want to be there. And I'm admitting to myself that I want to be there. And that's exactly what happened. Is I broke up with Claire. Sorry, I'm like tripping over my words. I broke up with Claire, and you know, instantly my life became significantly better. And it wouldn't last because I was dumb, but it was just such a relief to be away from her and in a place where I was just free to be and free to like someone and have a crush for the very first time. And that was so relieving in a way that I don't even know how to really describe. Like, I was on cloud nine for an entire month after, you know, talking to a boy for the first time, because I was like, this is life. Oh my gosh, this is life. Like, we're here finally. We get to participate in life.
I get to participate in life. Yeah, that's really profound, right? Because that's exactly what you're asked not to do. Is either ignore yourself and marry somebody that you're not attracted to, or become celibate, which is really ignoring, so both of those ignore your vitality, your eroticism, your capacity for pleasure. And now for the first time, you're allowing yourself some permission.
Yeah.
So, and you go on to date a few people and have your first sexual experiences while still a student at BYU. If I remember correctly, your father, I think your parents divorced, and your father left the church or no longer believed as much in the church. So he was sharing concerns, right? He was like, yeah, okay, you're gay, and what do you BYU, and do you want to transfer? And are you aware that they might control your transcript? And so your dad was kind of sharing these concerns, and you were kind of annoyed by that, right? Like, you weren't ready to look at that piece.
I was still pretty far from deconstructing the church. Like, I don't really know how to convey the cognitive dissonance in a way that actually makes sense. But I was thrilled to be dating men and to not have to think about the church. And I was not ready to unpack the church. I was not ready to leave the church, to think critically about the church, to think critically about anything, really. And so,
and I really want to normalize that. Like, I think that's a very common experience. I'm sorry to
no, that's I mean, that's good for me to hear, because I just like, it's so funny, because on one hand it was so simple, like, go and be gay. Like, that was so clear and so simple in my mind, like, to the point where there was no hesitation. And yet at the same time, I have these complex feelings about the church. So yeah, no, definitely that's validating. And I think that my dad kind of probably assumed that I was further along in unpacking it than I was. And I was not. and it definitely caused some contention and some frustration on my end, where I just didn't want to deal with it, and I wasn't ready to have that critical level of conversation about it, where I could talk about it from and kind of an outside perspective, but also just a critiquing, like, really understanding it for what it is without it sparking a level of defensiveness. That's really what it gets down to, is the defensiveness that the critiquing sparked within me.
Yeah, right. So briefly, before we totally run out of time, because I know we're getting close, but you do end up going through kind of a disciplinary process with your bishop and end up sharing information with him. And again, it feels kind of like, you're kind of coerced to go in there with your girlfriend, and then the bishop's asking very specific questions, and I can kind of sense your hesitation to answer these questions, but eventually you do. And then because there is hesitation, the bishop's saying, oh, maybe you're not really repentant, and questioning your, intents. And do you want to talk a little bit about that kind of messiness and how you were trying to stay true to yourself, but you're in this system that expects you to give all this information?
For sure. So I think that a lot of where I ended up with my bishop from the beginning was me not really understanding from an outside perspective how I was being perceived. Because I think that, it was like you said, I felt like I had to go see him because while I was dating Claire, she was like, "Oh, we got to go see the bishop about this problem that I caused, but we've got to go see him together." And I was very resistant to that, but eventually we ended up going and seeing him, and I was kind of like, I portrayed this situation of us kind of having just been struggling to maintain like this chaste boundary and didn't really know how to communicate. And there's a shame aspect of it, of like me not wanting to admit that I wasn't in control of the situation, that things were happening that I wasn't okay with. And so I was on his radar from that moment, being required to see him every 2 weeks. And I did not see him every 2 weeks, but by the time I was forced to go and see him again, I had entered my first, relationship with another man, and actually it had already ended by the time I saw that bishop again. And I was just so, there's more to the story, obviously, but I was just so kind of broken by that point that I was like, yeah, whatever. I had sex with a man. And that sparked the disciplinary council. And, I had to kind of go and explain the situation for men that I hardly knew, and go into some amount of detail about what exactly had happened, what I had done, and never at any point in time did I talk about what had happened with Claire, because I was too afraid to even bring that up. And he didn't bring it up, which I don't know why he didn't bring it up, because I for sure told him what happened between us was non-consensual. And that got him off of my back for a bit about that. He never brought it up again. And I don't know why. And I don't know what happened on her side. So I'm not going to assume what happened there. But yeah, that wasn't even like relevant in their minds. Like, oh, this boy's on a self-destructive path because he was in an abusive relationship, and maybe we should be nice and that kind of thing. But I guess maybe ultimately at the end of the day, maybe they did understand, because I got placed on formal probation, which is where I remain today. I haven't changed my status. I haven't gone back to any bishopric. I don't know. I don't know what state my records are in. I don't know where my records are. I transferred them once. But yeah, I mean, like after that year, I made the decision to leave BYU because I was on probation. I would remain on probation, and in order to get off of probation, any future bishop would have to approve me being released from probation. I'm not sure on the technicals of how that all works. But yeah, essentially a bishop would have to release that lock, which would mean that on some level, my schooling would always be at risk, because it was like, they'd have to know the details, and bishop roulette is a real thing. And just because I got sort of lucky with one, doesn't mean that would happen again. And I could have stayed, but I hadn't gotten into the program that I wanted to get into the first year I applied, and that in combination with me just not wanting to take the risk of getting kicked out, I just made the decision to leave. Which, sucks, because it sets you back for sure. Sets you back credits wise. It's at the time I had perceived BYU as being prestigious to some degree, and maybe it is still. I don't really know, to be honest. But so it was hard, but it eventually became kind of a no-brainer, like, gotta go. And so,
yeah, I don't know that the church has a very good history of looking at context in regards to quote unquote sin, right?
yeah.
There's plenty of people who are brought to repentance for even their own rapes, and assault. And so I just don't think that there's sufficient training, trauma-informed training, sexual health training for people to not just see anything but the behavior, right? Instead of what is the context. Although, again, you weren't necessarily having gay sex because you had been traumatized. I think you were having gay sex because you were gay. So I think that they wouldn't make room for that context anyway. But
for sure.
But yeah, that is also interesting that we have an educational system that, although it's supported by federal funds and it's accredited by the by the United States, whatever accreditation, platforms, that people can have educational and career consequences due to what is considered moral or amoral behavior, and so never ceased to amaze me. So
for sure,
that can be the case with adults in the adult educational system of the United States of America. Yeah. So okay. So that, let's kind of wrap it up with kind of like, so where are you now? I think you did an excellent job in the book of presenting kind of like the struggle, the wrestle between, your faith and your faith community and your beliefs about, what it requires to be of God and to be worthy, while also wrestling with your own personal orientation, your sexual journey, the developmental delays that you went through due to that. And how you ultimately choose yourself over the dogma of any one religion. So yeah, how do you want to wrap up as far as how you feel where you are today and how that journey?
Yeah. And I think that, on some level, I for sure leave the ending just a little bit ambiguous for the purpose of, the self-insert of anyone who reads it and wants to get something out of it, because I'm not here to tell anyone how to live their life or what lessons to derive from their own experiences or my experiences. Me personally, I'm very happily married. We're stable, we're happy, we're in a good place, which is just crazy because you spend so long in this fight or flight mode that you get to a place and suddenly it's like, oh, we're okay now. Are you sure we're okay? I don't think we're okay. And it just takes a while to kind of like trust that, like, you built something, and there's obviously, I should acknowledge that there's a big level of privilege involved with that and the ability to build something, and we were very lucky in a lot of things that happened because we entered the housing market at the perfect opportunity right before everything, got really difficult. And so we were very lucky. And we're at a place where we're happy and stable. And that's the best we could hope for. So
ending, yes. Beautiful ending, while also a beginning of sorts, right? So that's really lovely. I'm so glad to hear that, Jonathan. So well, thank you so much for sharing this story with us. Thank you for writing your experience. Any last thoughts you want to leave with the audience? There's a younger version of you that's listening out there. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, I don't know. There's so many thoughts. It can be really difficult to trust that you can improve your situation, and especially if you're in the middle of things. But I definitely think that it's possible, and I definitely think that, whatever you want, as long as you can clearly define it, you can get there.
Yeah. Does get better, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just the difficulty and the risk of self-destructive behavior that you just gotta figure out how to handle that aspect of growing up in such an unstable social environment, and learn how to, I don't know. I'm not good at advice. I don't know if you can tell in this moment, I'm not good at advice. What I can bring to the table is understanding the experience. But yeah, no, it does get better.
Yeah, and one of the things that you did, which I forgot to mention, and I kind of loved how you had these little conversations along the book, is that you met with a therapist, right? And you found somebody who was able to be part of that kind of, I think, process, and some of the insights and the questions he would ask you, and how you know, that helped, I think, in that process as well. So there's definitely a lot of people who are out there to help. There's support centers and groups, and of course professionals and you know, friends, hopefully, that will definitely support people. Yeah. So it's sometimes it can feel lonely and isolating and not sure how you're going to get there, but it can get better for sure. So thank you so much for your story, and I wish you and your husband the very best in your endeavors together. And it was lovely having you. And
thank you so much for having me on.
I do with I was going to show it again, but you've got it in your background closeted.
I've got it somewhere.
Yes, it's closeted. So get a copy. It's great. Jonathan Alder. And it was lovely meeting you. So take care of yourself.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We'll see ya.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes are by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. Years of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. So we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. In our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her us from afar. Some places should be left alone. Nordishki shade so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart.